Hello, it is I, Trevor from Media Mementos, and boy do I have a story for you today. And it's the big one, my arch nemesis, the clay of Moralton High. It is none other than Mrs. Skatagat, my arch nemesis, the one that to this day still makes me angry for the irreparable damage she has done to many parts of my life. But it has a happy ending in the end, trust me, and I had my hand in it. So let me tell you about one of the worst people I've ever met, and I hope she's watching. So, Moralton High had a lot of things it was known for, like its weirdness for one, but also its pretty decent football team, and its drama department. I totally missed my finger there. The drama department was ran by Mr. Shrank. S-H-R-A-N-K. Not his real name, like I said, everyone has a fake name here. Mr. Shrank was one of the most beloved teachers in the county area. He was so fun and expressive. Word has it, he was like Jim Carrey, but if he was a drama teacher. He would always have the best plays put on, the highest energy, and he'd even make people that were only taking this class as an elective love it, and they'd come back year after year. In fact, there was such a fight to get into drama class that apparently if you didn't have literal seniority here, if you were not a senior, you had a hard time getting in. Slots would fill up like that, and then you'd be stuck with something else. And I was so excited because I loved acting. I loved expressing myself and being a whole other character, preferably the villain. So the day that I got Mr. Shrank would have been the greatest day of my life. 8th grade was the first time you could be in drama class, sort of. The high schoolers, being 9, 10, 11, and 12, they had their own class, and then 8th grade had its separate diet drama class, I guess you could call it. It was a miniaturized version of what you would go on to have in your last 4 years. And that was all fine and good, of course, as long as I got to have Mr. Shrank. I didn't. He left the year I was going into 8th grade. And it was a last-minute decision, too. We didn't find out until the first day of school. Great. But this new Mrs. Scatagat woman seems just as fine. Or at least that's what I thought. In my head, I was thinking anyone who would have had Mr. Shrank's old job has to be as awesome as he was, or at least kinda close, right? No, this woman was just about as tall as I was in, let's say, 10th grade, I think. Just golden, always pulled back into a really tight ponytail, hair, really squinty little eyes. I don't mean to be mean here, but the face like a rat. She even had wrinkles that kind of looked like the whiskers there. Probably one of the meanest things I'll ever say about someone here, but I feel no pity. Mrs. Scattagat immediately opened up the class, introducing herself, talking about what Mr. Shrank had done before, and how she was going to make things different. Or rather, how she would keep things the same. She promised that even though Mr. Shrank, the legend that he was gone, things wouldn't change around here, but she was lying. We did one play for spring semester called Law and Order Fairy Tale Unit, and if you've never read it before, don't. It's not good. It's basically, well, it's exactly what it sounds like. Law and Order Fairy Tale Unit. It's like if someone wrote Shrek, but didn't know how to write anything, let alone Shrek. It's all product placements and really easy references to other stories. Not worth your time. Not worth your time. And for whatever reason, she was a real big advocate for fairness in the world of theater. You know that whole saying, there are no small parts, only small actors or whatever? She didn't believe in that. She believed that small roles like ensemble were jokes, so you shouldn't take part in them whatsoever. And the way she fought that with this play was by splitting the cast in half. One act would have one cast, the next act would have another. And there were more than enough characters to go around and to have everybody play one role. But then, no, She had some people double or triple up. And because I loved drama so much, I was so excited, like I said, I wanted to get in good with Mrs. Skatagat. So I promised to film some rehearsals for her, maybe make a blooper reel, and she was all excited about it, at least to my face. Now I can kind of see that she had the face and fake voice of it all, but if you looked into her eyes, I'm sure there would have been just the deadness of not caring about the little peons out there. So I made it, and she said she was gonna put it on during our single performance. She did, in the middle of intermission on a tiny little screen pushed all the way in the back, so barely anyone could see it. And in fact, no one really knew what was going on. I felt great. But that's just the warm-up act. I was willing to give her the benefit of the doubt. She probably just picked a bad play, and hey, she's new. She needs a little bit of time to warm up. That she did. She did indeed need some time to warm up because her pure evil was not ready to be fully on display. But by the time I came into 9th grade, it was all set. 9th grade was where the real drama experience was supposed to begin. What Mr. Schrank did was he delegated his responsibilities to the other people in the class. We would have student directors. He would pick, I don't know, about 4, depending on the class size, of the students he felt had the greatest capability of handling this responsibility. And they would either write their own play, pick one that maybe a student wrote just for fun, or something pre-existing that we already had the rights to. And then he'd have this little award ceremony that I think they'd be called like the Shrankies or something, I don't know. And he'd give out these little statues he'd make based on best moments out of every one of the plays, and it was awesome. And sure enough, she announced that she was going to keep the same system, award ceremony and everything. Awesome. And so there were 2 classes now. Drama was in such high demand that they decided to make a first period and a second period class. I was in the second. And this one had a guy, let's call him Rupert. Rupert and his friend Joaquin, it'll make sense if you knew him. Rupert and Joaquin wrote a script together, and it was about nothing. It was kind of like Seinfeld the play. There was no story, no structure, nothing. It was essentially a giant joke. But because Rupert was a director, he picked that and went right ahead. Keep these things in mind. He was trusted with high responsibility, in the words of Mrs. Scatagat, but for whatever reason, she never vetoed this play that she didn't approve of. But it seems weird, though, because sometimes she wouldn't approve of it, and sometimes she would. It'd go back and forth. Sometimes she was saying, can't we add this? Can't we add, like, more of a Jesus message? Can't we add more of a plot beat here? But by then, it was already too late. And then after about, I'd say, 2 weeks of complaining, she decided to give up and was all of a sudden the biggest fan of the play. She thought it was so funny and charming and just this lovable little experience, especially one character that Joaquin would play. Joaquin is the son of Vietnamese immigrants. So when writing this play with Rupert, they came up with a foreign exchange student character that, let's be real, was Ling Ling from Drawn Together. It was not subtle and kind of racist. But we thought it was okay for a couple reasons. 1, there were actually jokes behind it. 2, the joke wasn't just, haha, he's Asian. He actually had a character, but he also just so happened to be a stereotype. The best way I could describe him is the foreign exchange student character Fez from that 70s show. Think of that, but from an actual country. And that's how we started off. But Mrs. Scatagat loved this character so much that he became the star of the show to her. She'd always go up to Joaquin and say, no, show more teeth, squint your eyes more, and all these really over-the-top things. And, we're kind of looking at each other going, yeah, he's a stereotype, sure. But don't you think this is a little much? Especially in a Christian school where we have people like Frabblehouse who will get offended if you breathe wrong. Are you sure about this? But at the same time, the people in charge were a junior and a senior. And I'm sure you know, high schoolers, especially high school guys, don't always have the best judgment. So they thought it was fun and funny, so they went along with her ideas. Then came time for the performances. We performed in front of our audience and they roared with laughter. They loved it. Even the foreign exchange students, like all 4 of them that we had at the school, they were from Korea, so not Vietnam, but, you know, Asian in general. You would think that with because we weren't making fun of Vietnamese people specifically, it was like a just Asian culture kind of thing. You know, the really low-hanging fruit. But they especially thought it was hysterical. We saw them in the audience just like holding their stomachs and laughing. And then that's where the good times stopped. So, you remember how Mrs. Skatagat was one of the biggest cheerleaders for this character? Well, we come to school the next day, and we come into her class, and she has a whole ring of chairs around one in the middle, and she sat in that middle one, and she would look around at everybody, even turning around to see those behind her, and she chewed us out for 30 minutes. I remember that because I was watching the clock, and she was chewing us out for this character, saying, "How could you go so over the top? That's not what was in the script. You went behind my back." And then she's going on about how the principal and I think even Superintendent Harding was going on about how offensive this was and how they got complaints from students. Even though, like I said, we only had 5 foreign exchange students and we asked all of them and they loved it. So I don't know where the 6th one came from. Not sure. But she was laying into us, and then I will never forget this. This is the moment where I realized Mrs. Scatagat wasn't really a replacement for Mr. Schrank. He was actually an instrument of Moralton High. She said this: "I'm going to take the blame for this. I will take full responsibility, but I want you to know that this is your fault." Pardon, Mrs. Scatagat? Care to explain that one to us? As far as I remember, this was all your idea. Yeah, Rupert and Joaquin had to go in front of the entire student body at our next week's chapel, because we had weekly chapels every Thursday, and apologize to everyone. And their parents were not happy, other parents were not happy, and the students were really not happy. Especially because, again, they all loved the play. Not even just the over-the-top Asian stereotype character. They thought the entire thing was funny. Like I said, it was basically a high school version of Seinfeld. But that play ruined everything for everybody else, thanks to Mrs. Skatagat. And we knew that right away as soon as we got to the award ceremony, where we were disqualified for everything because of the character. And then the next semester rolled around. She decided to appease the higher-ups, I guess, of Moralton High. She was going to make the rest of the one-acts children-based for the rest of the year. But there was only 1 more semester's worth of them, so yeah. They would be directed towards kids, and everybody had to write their own play under strict supervision. This was the greatest thing ever for me. I wanted to be a writer, still do. So I decided to write my own play. I called it Moses or whatever. And it was a satirical take on the story of Moses. And one of the directors picked it. I didn't know who this person was. He was in the period before mine. But yeah, that was the first time ever someone had said that my writing was worthy of being put on. Of course, I saw a lot of my friends and some great actors get into it. But I was really sad that Joaquin and Rupert never got to take part in it. Rupert transferred out of the class, and Joaquin tried, but the guidance counselor wouldn't let him. And then he walked through the door the first day and went, no, I'm not doing this. Just want to let you know I'm out. And I'm not even joking. Mrs. Scatagat got on her bony little knees and begged him to stay. He did not. I never saw him again. And I think that that's a good little way to show the kind of mentality this woman has. She can screw you however she wants, but if you do one slight little thing to harm her ego and you don't forgive her instantly for the terrible thing she does to you, it's your fault. You're the bad guy. And I would later find that out myself, personally. So as time would go on, the play I wrote would be a big hit. Everyone loved it. I wasn't in it. I was in something else entirely. And for the most part, that last semester went off without a hitch. But I still walked away strongly disliking Mrs. Skatagat for what she tried to pull, and regrettably succeeded at pulling. And then we get to sophomore year. I wrote another play that was accepted by one of the directors, and it was not good. I mean, looking back, wow. You could tell I was just starting out being a writer and that I didn't know what I was doing. But you know how else I knew? Well, after it was selected by one of the directors, Mrs. Scatagat was stunned. See, in order to prevent something like the play from last year from ever happening again, she put in stricter guidelines. She wanted more story focus, she wanted stronger characters, and much stronger themes of Jesus. It's a Christian school, absolutely, I understand. But at the same time, she was asking us to shoehorn in a Christian message where it didn't belong. And, you know, I did all those things. I even shoehorned it in so it didn't make sense. But she would not stop telling me how much she hated it. She even pulled me aside one day saying like, no, this is like really bad. Can't you just like rewrite this? And keep in mind, she's just like, she's not even giving constructive criticism. She's just saying what's bad, what she hates about it. And it lasts for about 15 minutes that day. And I walked away feeling destroyed. See, I had really bad self-confidence issues when I was younger. Growing up as a lonely only child does that to you. And, you know, like I said, I was starting off with my writing, I guess you could call it a career, and I was trying to find my footing, and I'm a high schooler, a freaking high schooler. Do you really expect me to be writing William Shakespeare or whatever? I don't know why I said that in a really bad New Jersey accent, but I just did. Take that. Yeah, so constantly she would tell me how bad it was, and she even got some of the other cast to be telling me the same thing too, and I'm in this one too. I'm playing one of the lead villains, and I'm feeling terrible. Like, you know, if you hate it so much, help me work to fix it. But the director pulled me aside and was like, no, I like it. I think it's funny. We're keeping it. And we performed it, and people actually liked it. Looking back, like I said, it's really cringy, but as I said before, high schoolers don't have the best judgment. They also don't have the best writing skills, because they take time to develop. And those things that Mrs. Scatagat would tell me planted a seed of doubt that would stay in me for quite a long time. More on that later. Then we came to spring semester again, and she said, you know, the last children's one acts were so successful that we're going to do it again. We're closing off the audience. No high school can come, only the elementary school. And I was thinking, okay, fine, I can roll with this. Moses or whatever was such a big hit, I'm gonna make a follow-up, and it was called Shadrach, Meshach, and what's his name? And I thought it was even better. Even to this day, looking back, the original script, pretty good. It was selected again by, what should I call this one? Yeah, this one's fun. So, Mrs. Scatagat had a little sidekick. And this sidekick was the epitome of little man syndrome, except a woman. Think of Eddie from Edda and Eddie mixed with Dan from Dan Versus, and had the ego just blown out of proportion. There you'll have this girl here. And what should I call her? I'll call her Griselda. Griselda was about up to here on me, but her bark was just as nasty as her bite. Just like constantly barking orders, bossing people around, the least fun director you can have. And she wasn't even the director. She was another actor who was accepted to be another role in the play. And the director just kind of let her boss everyone around. It felt like there were 1.5 directors with Griselda being the main one and the actual director, way, way lower. But that's okay, as long as we're doing my script, I'm fine. And hey, they want me to be in it. Awesome. And they also want me to give creative input. Double awesome. I look at the script, and that's not what I wrote. They butchered it. Not only that, they went behind my back without telling me and rewrote my entire script and put my name on it. And it sucked. Mrs. Scattagat thinks of herself as a fine artist, I'll have you know. She used to, I don't know if she still does, I think it's out of business, so I'll say she used to own her own traveling Christian theater company that would put on these weird little plays that she would put on herself. Some of them still survive on YouTube, and I have watched them. She's terrible. I normally wouldn't be that emphatic about that, but it just feels good to be ripping into her in this video format. Like I said, I hope she sees it. I can be a little vindictive like that towards people that mess with me. And if you think that this isn't that bad now, it gets worse. Trust me. So yeah, those things were video proof that she does not know how to write. She also doesn't know how to act, but that's another story. And yeah, everyone was looking at me going, dude, what happened? Like, you wrote that really good one last year. This doesn't feel like you. And I kept saying, that's because it's not me. See, this wasn't supposed to be this, it was supposed to be that. In fact, one day, I even brought in the original copy of the script to show everybody, look, this is how it's different. Mrs. Skatagat didn't like that. She pulled me aside with the real director and Griselda and went, now, I hear that you're telling people that you're not happy with the script you wrote. I'm like, yeah, because I didn't write it, did I? And she's like, okay, well then let's talk about it. And basically I was pointing out these different lines and they were just saying like, oh yeah, we didn't like it. We didn't think it was funny. So we changed it to this. I'm like, all right, you didn't think it was funny. So you replaced it with something that wasn't a joke. It was kind of just people being idiots the whole time and standing around doing nothing. All the sight gags, wordplay, characterization, all gone. All gone. And at the end, they didn't say sorry. They didn't promise to undo any of it. They kept it going. In fact, what they used to do, they stopped after this year, was they put promotional posters on windows of all the classrooms for the one acts that you could go see. And I don't know why they did them for this one, because the high schoolers couldn't see them. They printed it out, and it looked terrible, but it had written by me at the bottom. I'm like, what's that? I think that's a typo there. That's not supposed to be there. And then we got in a big fight because I kept saying, like, take my name off. I didn't write this piece of crap. And they did. They, in fact, never even put up the poster because it was, I guess, too late by then. I'm okay with that. The performance didn't go over very well. People didn't think it was funny. I got the blame for it from Mrs. Scattagat going like, well, people just didn't like it, I guess. It happens. Yeah, like I said, I was really insecure about myself back then, and I felt really bad about that. And especially because, that little round table conference, I guess you could call it, was basically just there for those three people to say that I sucked. And then they replaced it with something terrible, and then when the terrible thing goes over badly, I got the blame. Not great, but it gets worse. There's also some main stage things she did. So, like the drama club after school. I was never a part of this because I didn't want to get near her at all. The first year, she did a musical based on one of the books of the Bible. She didn't write it, she just bought the rights, and it was actually really good. The choreography was a little weird because Moralton High doesn't believe in dancing, so they kind of cheated the choreography, so they were dancing, but then not. But the acting was surprisingly good, and of course, since she didn't write it, the script was top-notch. And I was excited for them to do something like that again next year. I was thinking, hey, maybe I can do that too. It might be fun. So my friend who was in the drama club with me, was called Four Eyes. Four Eyes and I went to the meeting for the sophomore year drama club thing where she pitched us the story, and it was one that she wrote. And it seems like she plagiarized it off a Lifetime movie because it had that same story that every single one tends to have. But what caught my attention was that she learned nothing from that Asian character story from freshman year. In fact, It got worse. In this play that she wrote, she had two Native American characters named Running Fawn and Snowwater. And what she wanted was to get two white women, young actresses, get red face paint, put it on, and then pretend to be Native Americans. They performed this way, by the way, and there were no complaints from the Moralton High higher-ups. I can't tell if this is stupidity, hypocrisy, evil, or some mixture of the three, but that just shows you how wild this school is. I can never get over that. It's like, if you hated the Asian character so much, how come this is okay? Is it because we don't have any Native American students at the school? I don't know. And then junior year came around. This one, people started to take note of what was happening to me, so I don't want to say they were pitying me exactly, but they were trying to help me out as best they could. What happened here was, I don't even remember who directed this one, so let's call him Questiony the question mark. So Questiony, or was it a he? I don't even remember. Questiony decided to make another one of mine that I wrote. It was about a silent thief trying to steal a precious item from a king. Can you tell it was based on The Thief and the Cobbler? Well, not based, it just took the loose inspiration of it. And it was funny, a lot of physical acting involved in this. And Mrs. Scattagat actually told me, "You actually made something good. Well done." That didn't make me feel good. But it did give me some opportunities to be able to explore my creative side a little bit. You know, shy Trevor wanted to help out. So he said, okay, we're struggling with learning our lines. Tell you what, if everybody learns their lines by Friday, or by Thursday, come Friday, I will do a one-man performance of this entire play for the whole class. They did it. And true to my word, I nearly killed myself performing the whole play on my own. Running here and there, doing all the lines. I came to geology class, which was my next period, with Mrs. Frabblehouse, or Miss Frabblehouse, just red-faced and sweating, and man. But even still, Skatagat was treating me weirdly, like constantly telling me these like bad things, you know. Less so this semester. She, for the most part, left me alone, but every so often she'd be kind of sneaking in little things like, because I was mentioning at one point that I wanted to be a TV writer or something, because that's what I wanted to be at the time. And she was saying, well, you know, you're the only one that's going to be going into this, so I got to give you some special attention. And then the special attention would always involve me being miserable and being told that I couldn't write for crap. And so then we get to spring semester of junior year. The rest of the main stage stuff isn't important. I just felt I should mention it because of what we called the red face incident. That's what we called it at school. Okay, so spring semester of junior year. Where do I even start with this one? Skatagat decided to do away with the whole student director thing. Well, she had it in place, but they would be puppets. She said she would take over and then the student directors would be her assistants. And she chose the blandest, most boring plays I have ever seen. And I feel a little bad about saying that because one of them was student written, but it was just the story of Cinderella with everybody's names changed. And I didn't like that because that was the one I was in. I was supposed to be the king of Landyland and the dad of Prince Charming. And my dialogue was so boring. Everyone's dialogue was so boring. There was no joke, there was no spark, no character, nothing. So I decided to spice it up a little bit just by giving some energy and, you know, just kind of being a little out there, trying different things to diversify the character a little bit. But each one would have Skatagat scolding me, saying like, no, that's not how you do it. And like, just the more I would try to do something new and the more I try to do something inventive, the angrier she'd get. And the more she'd bark at me. And then it started getting really nasty too. Saying that things like I'm not funny, like I don't know how to act. Because for whatever reason, I don't think I mentioned this up until this point. But that's because she didn't make it clear until this year. She let me know that she doesn't consider comedy to be legitimate writing. And keep in mind, this is the year I discovered Drawn Together, so I was kind of on that kick. I was super into the show, and I was exploring my creative side a bit, taking a lot of inspiration from the banter and the character dynamics from that, trying to hone my own thing, because at this time, the show I'm working on now, Dorland Misadventures, then known as Standard Misadventures, was starting to get off the ground a little bit. And I was writing some of the scripts and testing some of the things out, so I was trying to make it my own, and well, like I said, she didn't value comedy whatsoever. Everything had to be basic, honestly. And whatever comedic relief elements had to be shoved to the side. And, she didn't like me doing this stuff, and she got nasty. And then even, pulling me aside and saying, that was the problem with what I was doing, as I was trying to be funny and it wasn't working. Keep in mind, it was never telling me what didn't work. It was just the fact that I was trying to be funny. And the fact that I didn't fit into her narrow worldview of what writing was supposed to be, which, keep in mind, I have seen since graduating. It's a bunch of moral spewing, nonsense stuff that thinks it's really clever and self-aggrandizes itself, and, well, I don't like to use this word, but I like to call it theater masturbation, was how I describe it. Because the writing of what she would do was just, you could tell with the way that it framed itself, that it thought it was so clever, and that it was so funny whenever it had the little instances of comedy in there. For example, one of the plays she did, I'm not going to say too much about it because I don't want you to track Scattagat down, as much as I don't like her. But one of the plays she did was about a workplace where one of the people is an atheist. And because she works at Moralton High, I think you can understand that, as we all know, atheists love nothing more than talking about how much they hate God. And as soon as you mention Bible or Jesus, they go, and I'm not even exaggerating, that is how it went in the play. Played by Scattagat herself, by the way. Chew on that one. Yeah, it got to a head, at this point, where I wanted to switch schools because she was making me feel so bad about myself. I dreaded going to her class every day because I knew something would happen where she would either tell me I was doing something wrong, or she would just say my writing sucked, or just try to fit me into her narrow box. Because I remember, again, I'm trying to explore my creative side here, and that's also a lot of what high school's about. It's finding yourself and who you are and what you want to be and what you want to do. But she wasn't letting that. She was stifling my creativity. And it normally wouldn't be so bad, but again, one, I had those self-confidence issues, and two, I was in Moralton freaking High. This place was so restrictive and such a negative environment that the one creative outlet that I had, that I could rely on in theory, was the worst place for me to go. It felt like I couldn't enjoy my hobby because I was going to have Scatagat breathing down my neck. It got so bad that a couple of my friends and I started wearing these star badges on our chests saying that we don't approve of what's going on. It was a protest, and this is when I was starting to snap. I was done. She called a class meeting to discuss those, and we pawned it off as oh no, this is just a little inside joke thing because, well, to be fair, we had a running joke that we had the Moralton High Workers' Party in our last play, the Thief one. And it was basically it was a secret society communist party that doesn't actually do anything. They just pretend that they're elites or whatever. It was a dumb joke. Yeah, so we spun it off as a version of that. I don't think she believed it, but from then on, she had me in her sights. Everything got worse, and it got so bad that I wanted to switch schools. I think I said that already, but I was actively telling my parents, screw private school, I'm going public, get me out. And then there was one day when I was talking with Skatagat, because she was pulling me aside again to talk about, you're being too silly, you gotta stop. Because I forgot to put in something. After one particular conversation, actually it was the one with the badges where she told people about that, that's when I really wanted to go to public school. So then I thought, I don't care anymore. I don't care what any of these people think about me, especially Scatagat. I'm going to go insane. So what I did throughout every rehearsal was, say my line was, "Oh, hello, dear son. Thank you for coming. I am so glad you received my summons." I turned into, "Hey, sonny boy, thanks for coming. I'm glad you got my message. What do we have for him, Johnny?" Like all those kind of really obnoxious Jim Carrey stuff. And then I had this running joke where I would love mayonnaise and I'm like, time for my mayonnaise break. Like that in the middle of rehearsal. And at this point, we're pretty far in, so everyone knows what to do. We're just kind of going over things to smooth out the edges, I guess you could say. So everyone thought this was hysterical. The writer, not as much, but she still gave it a chuckle here and there. I feel a little bad now, again, because she was being used as a pawn by Skatagat. I didn't want to make her feel bad or anything, but when you're dealt the crappy hand, you gotta make do with whatever you got, you know? And she hated it. So again, she pulled me aside saying, "This has to stop." And then I was saying like, "Well, you know, it's because of this that I'm leaving." And she was saying like, "Oh yeah, it's a shame you're leaving Moralton High." And I'm like, "No, I'm not." Because at that point I decided that I wasn't going to leave for public school after all. I was going to have to stay the course after I heard some iffy things about the public school I would be going to. So I decided to stick it out, but just switch out of drama. And I told her, "No, I'm switching out of drama." And then she looks at me like deer in headlights, surprised Pikachu face, going, "What? Why are you leaving?" And then I rip into her for 15 or so minutes. Everything she put me through, everything she made me feel, like how no matter where I could go, I would never feel right about myself, and like I was never good enough in her eyes, and that she would never try to help me. She only tried to tear me down and flaunt her success in my face, as she would often do. She'd often mention her little theater group, I guess you could call it, saying that that's how you make real stuff, and I should learn from her. Not actually saying how. And then after that, she just kind of was like, "Okay, you can go, just don't do the mayonnaise thing." And I could tell she was shaken up. I don't think she looked at me in the eye again after that for the rest of the year. And after that, my friend Four Eyes, who heard about that little blow up, word kind of spread it a little bit. He told me about this local theater that I'll call Studio 22. And he's like, "Hey man, like I went there, it was great. If you really want a place to express yourself creatively and, you know, be happy, why not give that place a try?" They were doing Willy Wonka the next fall, and I was like, "Okay, cool. There's going to be auditions in August. I think I'm going to do it." I auditioned, and I got the role of Mr. Salt, and it was one of the happiest times of my life. Because for the first time ever, I was around people that really cared about me, and that they really tried to help me when I was going through something, or, you know, give me support, or when I was doing something wrong, they told me what to do so I could fix it. I never felt like I wasn't good enough there. I was surrounded by like-minded people who liked the same things I did, felt the same way I did about things. And even if they were sometimes a little younger than I was, it felt like I was part of the family, because there was kind of a cliquish culture there since everyone had been there from like age 10 onwards. And now I was the high school senior coming in, and the other oldest person there was a sophomore. But they welcomed me with open arms, and they thought it was funny. They liked being around me. And little by little, my confidence began to rise, and to this day, I still have a box of mementos from that old community theater. It's because it really did change me as a person. At Moralton High, when I snapped, I just stopped caring what people thought about me, so I did whatever I wanted. But it was all a way to mask the insecurity and feeling that I was kind of alone and useless, honestly. But this place turned it around. But Scatagat didn't like that. She was not happy that I went to go seek theater needs elsewhere. But not like she could do anything to stop me. Not just because I wasn't going to bend to her evil little will just because she wanted to have control over me. But by this point, Skatagat was so hated amongst the student body that drama class's first period got cut in sophomore year because of the whole freshman year thing that caused a lot of damage. And then Now she had to beg people to come to her class. I think she was down from 40 students in total to this year only having 14. Which means she could only have 2 student directors because she implemented that thing again. After that last thing that she did, trying to take over, after that went so badly, no one liked the plays either. I'm sorry. She was desperate for help. And there were 2 student director slots. I was one of 2 who applied, and she knew she had to give me the slot. There was no other option. What was she going to do? Turn me down? Then it would be very clear that she was trying to get after me. She gave me the responsibility, and I knew it killed her inside to do it. But I was going to be the bigger man. I was in a new home now. I was happy. So I was going to help my actors be happy as well. We did a play adaptation of Wayside. The book series by Lewis, can't pronounce that last name. Sacher, something. And it was a lot of fun. Everyone loved the play. Everyone had a great time doing it. I even had a little bit of a little fun game going around where if you were the first one to memorize your lines, you got a golden ticket, because I was in Wonka, with a box of candy. And then every prize would get smaller and smaller until you were last place. Then you got the brown ticket, which was a bag of moldy bread and a rotten banana peel, and you had to carry it throughout the whole class. Our lead got it. He played Todd. And if you think that this was cruel or something, no, they all thought it was hilarious. In fact, when I mentioned it, I was like, all right, so what do you think? They're like, do it, yeah! They thought it was hilarious. And sure enough, I have a video of the guy who played Todd, because, we had to shoehorn Christian themes into everything. And, again, I'm saying this as a Christian. You can't just shoehorn God into stuff because that kind of cheapens the message. But I have a video of Todd praying to the bag going, God, what should I do? How could I stop Mr. Kidswatter? It was so funny. And then, I'm not even making this up, the yearbook team comes in as that scene's going and they take pictures of it. I think it's in the yearbook. I gotta go check. It's in my bedroom over there. It was great. But Scatagat wasn't happy. Firstly, she wasn't happy with the play I wrote. At least 3 times she pulled me aside, going like, well, this doesn't make sense here. This isn't how a principal would act. This isn't how a school is. I'm like, yes, that's the point. It's Wayside. It's upside down, or I guess sideways. Nothing makes sense here. She wouldn't get it. She didn't like how Principal Kidswatter was being manic and childish. She didn't like Steven wearing the costume. In fact, she vetoed the costume. His whole point was that he thinks every day is Halloween, right? Well, she didn't like that because kids wouldn't wear costumes to school every day. And then at one point, I even remember, this got me so mad. She's like, this is what we've been talking about for the last 3 years, remember? And I just stare blankly at her and go, yeah, I remember. Staying in. But she also didn't like I said before, that I went to another community theater to get what I needed out of theater. Since Willy Wonka was a family-friendly play, what she took notice of was that there were school performances. A school could book a showing at Studio 22, and then they could see a matinee, and that would be like a little field trip. And she had Moralton High's, or I guess Moralton School's, first and second grade classes go to see it. But what she told them was, it's rude to clap in a musical until the very end. And this was bad. If you've ever seen a musical, let alone been in one, you know that applause after a song is kind of important. So picture this. We're singing I Got a Golden Ticket. It's our big Act 1 finale. We're dancing. We're doing all the stuff. We pose. Silence. It was the weirdest thing in that entire performance, next to me splitting my pants on opening night, but that's a story for another day. I didn't find out it was Skatagat till the next semester. She was trying to one-up me. But when I found out, I just told her, like, hey, so, I heard that you were the one who booked that school performance for Willy Wonka. She's like, yeah, that was me. And I kind of did that thing where you know what they've done, they know you know, but you don't let them know until they bring it up themselves. And if they don't, then it's just the subtext. By this point, she knew that she had no power. She tried to ruin my script, she tried to change it, she tried to ruin my performance. All that was left to do was sabotage the acting. I was a student director again for my final semester, and I did a play based on Dave the Barbarian, my favorite show of all time. Dave the Barbarian, and my writing in general, are heavy word-based things. Dialogue, as in banter, wordplay, and just natural chemistry, is really important. And she knew that. And this year, she's like, okay, or this semester, she's like, I'm going to pick who's in your casts. I'm not going to have you debate with the other director over who's going to be in what. I'm going to pick. She gave me all 3 of our foreign exchange students that were left. They couldn't speak English. They had to use translators most of the time. She knew what she was doing. And I vowed revenge. Firstly, Moralton High doesn't allow dancing, so I told them, okay, if you don't learn your lines by a certain day, I'm going to have you do a tap dance number called the Toledo Surprise that I learned in the Drowsy Chaperone. Another thing Studio 22 did. So if you don't get it in by a certain date, I'm teaching you to tap dance the whole class. And I did. Don't worry, everyone had a good time, but Scatagat liked it at first, then she was like, okay, stop. Because I think she didn't want people coming in to see what we were doing. I didn't care. I didn't care. But my revenge wasn't done. Moralton High did something a little weird. I was a senior that year, right? Well, seniors, let's say they graduated June 7th. The performances for these plays would be June 14th. Uh-oh, what's gonna happen? Well, apparently what seniors had to do was volunteer to come back and perform the play. When I found that out, I knew what I could do. I cast myself as the main villain, Bob the Invader. He's not a character from the actual show. Well, he is. He's just in one episode and he has like 1 line. No, 2. But I cast myself as that character. And I was like, oh, I'm totally coming for the performance, by the way. Absolutely. I wouldn't miss it for the world, Skatagat. You just mean so much to me. I didn't show up. But I, of course, being the civil and respectful gentleman that I am, I told her a week in advance, and she was freaking out. She was like, you can't do this, we need you! You're one of the main characters, you're the... I didn't care. And I just stared at her with this smug little grin going you cannot make me. I will have graduated by then. You can't do anything. She tried to do something. She threatened to dock my grade, and I'm too late, grades will be posted by then. And you can't retroactively change it, and you can't dock me points for 1, something that's not graded, and 2, for something that hasn't even happened yet. So then she wrote to my mom, complaining about what I was doing, can't you stop his plan? My mom wrote a giant wall of text in response, laying out everything she's done to me, and all the depression I've had, and the self-loathing because of her, and she's like, he was the one student that wanted to be something creative, and you tried to squash it and make him feel like nothing. This is what you deserve. What they ended up doing was getting this one really sweet kid, but he couldn't act his way out of a wet paper bag, to fill in for me. And apparently the performance bombed hard. Because, again, the foreign exchange students couldn't speak English, and this guy in question couldn't act. The whole thing fell apart, and she was embarrassed in front of everybody. Because she signed off on it, and remember, she's supposed to be in charge of this, so anything going wrong, she's supposed to fix it. That didn't happen. The last time I ever saw her was when I went to one of her classes. I think this was 2 days before graduation. We had a little slip that all of our current teachers had to sign to say, okay, everything is done, they're good to graduate, all set. She wouldn't even look at me. It was I come in the room, she sees me, immediately looks away. I hand it to her and say, I need you to sign this. She takes it, signs it, hands it back, will not look at me. The performance hasn't happened yet, but she knew what was going to happen. And I never saw her again. I've since found out that she got fired from Moralton High. After all this time, finally, no one else has to suffer under her, and word has it that they constantly wanted to fire her after each incident, but because everyone hated Moralton High, no one wanted to work there. So that happened. Additionally, her theater company's webpage has gone mysteriously quiet. Not for lack of trying, though. She even asked me a couple times if my church was going to be willing to put something on from hers, and I laughed at her. Well, I laughed at her once. The other time I was like, I'll think about it. And then another time I laughed. I'm pretty sure I laughed. I know I laughed, at least in my head. I'm sure I did it outwards, though, because I didn't care at that point for anything she said. I don't hate many people, but some of the closest I come to hating somebody is her. The kind of stuff she did to me over those 4 years, kind of trying to let me know how much I suck and all that stuff, still there. My self-confidence issues have mostly gotten better, but, growing up in that kind of environment, especially when you're really malleable as a teenager, that sticks with you. And the kind of things that she said to me and would often do, it's still kind of there. There's always that, I don't want to say inferiority complex, because that kind of blows it out of proportion, but to this day, it's still kind of, I'm a real perfectionist with my work because I don't want to fall to that kind of level, so to speak, and just, it kind of feels like sometimes I'm never really good enough, And I know that, I am. You guys keep sticking around on these videos, you love them, you tell me all the time how much you enjoy hearing me talk and seeing what I have to say and all that, but sometimes it's kind of hard to feel like you're really making a difference and that you're really as good as everyone says. Because what if they're wrong? What if their judgment's wrong, kind of thing. Skatagat, I hope you're watching this, and if you are, you deserved everything you've gotten. Look at me now. I've got a steady job going. I live on my own. I've got a good YouTube channel with a loyal fan base and a lot of people in my life on the internet and in real life that love me. And what do you have? You have nothing. You have nothing. I'm happy that you have nothing. That's how you made me feel for 4 years. Don't come crying to me for help for anything, because I'll just laugh and laugh. And as for the rest of you out there, thank you very much for sticking with me over this crazy series. We're not done yet. We've got a few more stories to tell. But what'd you think about this? What do you think are the craziest things she did? And what do you think are the worst things she did? Comment below. Let me know. And I look forward to seeing you guys next time.